Welcome back to the college football playoff scenarios video, and in this one we are taking a pivot from the previous ones where we ranked the top 25 teams. In this one I'm going to take you through 6 tiers of teams that can still make the playoffs. Some of them are extreme long shots, but as I promised, every team that can still make the playoff will be in this video. Let's start off with tier 1, can afford a loss pretty much under any circumstance, and that is Georgia. That massive win over Tennessee, they handled them. They've now dominated 2 playoff contenders and pretty much have sealed their place in the SEC championship. I think they make the playoff even with a loss, so Georgia is a near lock to make the playoff. Tier 2, we're going to have teams that if they win out, they're a lock for it, but they can probably afford a loss with some help. So Ohio State and Michigan are pretty much in the same boat. As long as they don't lose to each other, say Michigan loses before playing Ohio State loses before playing Michigan, they still control their own destiny for getting to the Big Ten championship. On the flip side, if Michigan beats Ohio State, then loses in the Big Ten championship, I think that they're safe. The one thing they can't do is lose to each other. TCU has a similar scenario. I think the only game they can really afford to lose is either the Big 12 championship, but probably this coming week against Texas, because they'll probably play Texas in the Big 12 championship and could get that loss back. So they would still need significant help, but the end-all be-all is if these 3 teams win out, they would be a lock for the playoff, greater than 99% chance, nearly 100%. Now, tier 3, they need one thing to happen their way and to win out. So for Oregon, they have an 87% chance. The percent chance is always if they win out, what would it be with nothing else happening to make the playoff? For Oregon, 87%. They'd need one SEC team and one Big Ten team, and then probably one from any other conference, or I guess a second SEC team. You just need one of those things to happen. So LSU here now is in an interesting scenario with the 2 losses. The committee obviously values them greatly. I don't know what they're going to be this week, but they were 10 last week, which is very scary. So I have them here in second. If they win out, they'll have a good win over Georgia. They might need to blow them out, but still, they'll have wins over Bama, Georgia, and that close loss to FSU. The committee doesn't really seem to be favoring, but they also have a win over Ole Miss. So LSU, 85% chance. They need pretty much it to be 2 SEC teams and then just the Big Ten and then one of the other conferences, probably no ACC in this case. USC, similar scenario to Oregon. They control their own destiny for the Pac-12 championship if they win out. So it's an 81% chance for them. Pretty much need the same things to happen as Oregon did. The final team in here is Clemson, coming off that brutal loss to Notre Dame. Notre Dame's now beat 3 ACC teams this season. That is brutal for that conference that has not done very well in the out-of-conference. Clemson has a 73% chance if they win out. An SEC team and a Big Ten team are pretty much locks here, so then you need an ACC, which means you need not 2 from either of those aforementioned conferences, and then you'd need either a TCU loss and them to not be considered, and then no Pac-12 team. So you can get one Pac-12 or Big 12 team if you're Clemson here, and then one from the Big Ten and one from the SEC, but not 2 from any of them. Tier 4, we move on to need chaos plus a win out for them. So we're going to start with UCLA. If they win out, they do not necessarily win the Pac-12, since there is a possibility for a 3-way tie with UCLA, Oregon, and Utah, assuming Utah wins out and beats Oregon, which isn't that likely. So UCLA would probably be able to win the Pac-12 championship, but for now it's 61%, as they're not guaranteed, since Utah could still win out. So 61% for them. They pretty much need to guarantee their spot in the Pac-12 championship, either Oregon to win out until then, or just the teams that they've played to do pretty well in conference play down the stretch. So a lot of things could happen for them, but enough said about that. They still have a huge game with USC down the road, so they've just got to control their own destiny. We'll get a clearer picture on their playoff scenario as 1, we see the committee's rankings this week, and 2, we see whether they are able to win out and what happens across the college football landscape. So again, there's still a few weeks left for each of these teams, at least 3 games in the regular season and then the conference championship. So a lot will change, but right now, again, these are just some of the teams. Then Ole Miss, 33% chance if they win out, but if they get an LSU loss and then can win the SEC West, which they would if they'd win out, because they'd be above Alabama and then any other team pretty much, because they've already beat A&M and they will have beat Mississippi State at that point. They will be 98%, which is higher than LSU because they only have the one loss to LSU. So that would be crazy if Ole Miss could make it after kind of flying under the radar after that LSU loss. But now LSU's won a couple games. So Ole Miss, 33% chance without that LSU loss, but 98 if they can get an LSU loss and then beat Georgia in the SEC championship. That would be insane. But yeah, Ole Miss would be a near lock if they could get in. Gonna need a miracle status. This is tier number 5. And we've got Tennessee, 51% chance. Tennessee doesn't really have much rigor in their schedule, but they also pretty much cannot make the SEC championship. Georgia's just not going to lose their 2 remaining games in there. So Tennessee's in kind of an unfortunate spot. They need a lot of chaos, say no Big 12 team, no Pac-12 team somehow. But easier for them, it's probably 2 SEC, them and Georgia, and then 1 Big 10 team, and then a Pac-12 team, because I think the ACC and Big 12 would be easiest to rule out, because TCU is really the only even 1-loss team in the Big 12. So if TCU just racks up 2 losses, say Texas wins out, that would be pretty easy for Tennessee to go in there. And then UNC, if they win out, they're a 1-loss team out of the ACC. Again, they'd probably need 1 SEC team, 1 Big 10 team, and then, you'd have the College Football Playoff Committee litigating UNC 1 loss against Tennessee with 1 loss, which is kind of crazy. I mean, obviously they'd have that good win over what would then be a 2-loss Clemson in the championship game. So, UNC squeaked a lot of these games out, but they're definitely in it. And then finally, the complete chaos, tier number 6. And this is not going to happen for any of these teams, but again, the percentages are, if they win out, some of these teams are going to have to obviously win their conference to do that, and that might be the hardest part. But for Texas, 3 losses. I mean, the committee obviously values them highly. Just got another win this week against Kansas State, so that was another team that the committee really valued. They have a chance against TCU next week, and then a possible rematch against TCU in the Big 12 championship. So Texas could be well on their way. The only thing that they have to worry about is the question mark between them and Bama. Say Bama only has 2 losses, Texas has 3, I mean, there's obviously a lot of other stuff Texas would have to come up over to even be in that scenario, but pretty much they need 1 SEC team, 1 Big 10 team, and then 1 team from any other conference, and then they need to win their conference. So for Illinois, how do they win their conference? They just win out. So, I mean, obviously, I think Ohio State or Michigan would still be in. So then Illinois would need 2 Big 10 teams to make it, only Georgia out of the SEC, and then probably the Pac-12 has the most likelihood of any other conference. Utah, I mean, they need an Oregon extra loss to be able to win the conference. As you see, the 34%. I mean, this is just outlandish because of their loss to Florida. If they just didn't have that, they'd be in it. But they do. They could beat Oregon once and then USC again, or Oregon in the championship. It just depends. Or even UCLA in the championship. Those would all be good wins. So they have some rigor in the schedule. 34% chance. It's just probably not going to happen for a 2-loss already Utah with all of these teams above. But again, there is a slimmer of hope if complete chaos ensues. And then Alabama, 19% chance if they win out. But they need LSU to lose their 2 remaining SEC games to be able to make it. Of course, they jump Ole Miss because they would have beat them next week in next week's game. So that's it. That's every team that can still make the playoff. Again, those ones at the end are just a little bit of fun. This year we have a lot more undefeated teams at this point the second committee rankings than we did last year, even with that Clemson loss, even with that Alabama loss last week, but that just throws LSU in. So we'll see what happens. And thank you for watching. Please be sure to comment your predictions below and subscribe to the channel.